Our guest is Dr. Alveda King. You all know her. I don't really need to give a long introduction. She is the niece of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. She's also a representative priest for life. She has been one of the leaders in the pro-life issue in this nation for many, many years, but a leader across the board for wisdom. Every time I get a chance to talk to Alveda, I always leave feeling that I'm a bit more rooted and grounded because she always comes back to the love of God and what God wants to do with us, so that we can never be around her and get caught up in politics and vengeance and anger and bitterness, because God has just given her an anointing that removes that burden and destroys that yoke. So, Alveda, it's really an honor to have you on. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. Please go right ahead and share with us, and then we'll take some questions. Alveda, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I had it on mute. Please forgive me.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Oh, my goodness. But it's an honor to address all of you. Bishop Jackson, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to do so. I hope that all of you who are listening, I have a website, AfricanAmericanOutreach.com, and there I have 6 principles of nonviolence and a glossary of nonviolence, and that is on the home page. You have to just scroll down to the section of different articles that are available. And as I was praying with many, including Bishop Jackson and several prayer warriors and leaders, a phone call came to me, a Macedonian call, a clarion call from a minister, Kent Henry, who's a praise and worship leader. He lives there, from John Rodriguez, who has worked for Marilyn Hickey's ministry for many years, and many of my friends called. And I said, God, I'll go when you say it's time to go. And my cousin Bernice King is there now. My cousin Martin has been there twice. I will be going as part of our family also. But as I kept, when Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Jackson kept saying no justice, no peace, the Lord kept saying into my heart, no peace, no justice. My daughter says KNOW, peace, and my publicist, KNOW, justice. And I did say that on the air a couple of times. And just going further and further into that, we have to pray for peace. We really do have to pray that there is some type of action against the officer who did these things. I would not say he needs to be executed or in jail forever or anything like that, but if there appears to be absolutely nothing done, that's something else that we're going to have to pray about, because there are so many incidents where young black men disproportionately have been sanctioned in these manners, whether it was applicable, whether it was okay, whether they needed to change their lifestyles or not. So that's a quandary, and those are the things that I'm going to have to talk about. One, I'm not trying to make this too long, but officers are trained to shoot, kill, and eliminate the threat. They do not view the people that they're dealing with all the time as human beings. And so there may be a problem with the system that simply trains some people to do that. You see, so there are so many problems that are being addressed. Racism is in existence in America. I think that if we continue to try to deny that, we're doing a disservice. Megyn Kelly and Bill O'Reilly had a conversation about the disproportionate treatment of African-American men. And interestingly enough, somebody called me and said, I never thought that Megyn Kelly would become one of the biggest voices of support for black men. And we chuckled about it. But there are just so many things that are occurring. To wrap it up so I'm not taking too much time on the call, on my page, priestforlife.org, African American Nonviolence, the 6 principles of nonviolence. Nonviolence is not passive but requires courage. Nonviolence seeks reconciliation, not defeat of an adversary. Nonviolent action is directed at eliminating evil, not destroying an evildoer. A willingness to accept suffering for the causes, if necessary, but never to inflict it. a rejection of hatred, animosity, or violence of the spirit, as well as refusal to commit physical violence, and faith that justice will prevail. There are 6 steps to nonviolent social change. This is a sequential process of nonviolent conflict resolution and social change based on my uncle Martin Luther King's and his peers' teachings. 1, information gathering and research to get the facts straight. 2, education of adversaries and the public about the facts of the dispute. 3, personal commitment to nonviolent attitudes and action. 4, negotiation with adversary in the spirit of goodwill to correct injustice. 5, nonviolent direct actions such as marches, boycotts, mass demonstrations, picketing, sit-ins to help persuade or compel adversary to work towards dispute resolution. 6, reconciliation of adversaries in a win-win outcome and establishing a sense of community. I would add also prayer vigils would be part of the nonviolent action. So I wanted to kind of just point those out as we continue. Right now, our officers are really taught and trained to eliminate the threat. And that's why they don't shoot in the knee or the leg if someone is on some drugs and the drugs are so strong that doesn't stop them. You know, there are reasons for that. So we need to kind of examine and re-examine so many things. Yeah, so that's, I'll stop there, Bishop.
Well, Alveda, thank you again for your reflections on this, and we want to take some questions. Folks, if you have questions, please press *6 to ask Alveda any questions that you may have. Now, Alveda, the first question I want to ask you is this. Do you think we will ever reach a point in this country, because this is what I really long for. I believe it's what Dr. King longed for. I believe it's what you long for. But will we ever reach a point in this country where when an incident happens, because we are a racially mixed country, and there are going to be instances that where this is going to happen, where, say, a white police officer will shoot a black kid or a black police officer may shoot a white kid, or vice versa, maybe Hispanic, or who knows, where our people will be reconciled. There'll be a level of forgiveness, a level of trust for each other, that no one will jump to the conclusion that this had to be racially motivated, that people will assume, okay, this is a terrible thing. Maybe the police officer was wrong. Maybe the person who got shot did something wrong. We don't know. But we're going to wait and hear what the facts are, because, we know that, police officers are likely trying to do his job. Maybe the person was not doing anything wrong, and maybe his actions were misinterpreted, what have you, but we're going to wait and see, as opposed to what happens now, which is no matter what the facts are, if a white police officer killed a black person, the immediate assumption, rightly or wrongly, is that it was a racist act, or at least racism played some part in it. Will we ever get past that?
I believe we absolutely will get past that, Bishop Jackson. The hardest thing, I was with 2 of my colleagues last night, and they just kept glossing over. They couldn't hear what I was saying, and that's one of the biggest problems. When we consider ourselves to be separate races, we are separate nations, separate ethnic groups, but there's unity among that, because that's God's design. Acts 17:26 says, "In one blood God made all people to dwell on the face of the earth." So we are all human beings, but we do have ethnic groups which became clans, and then you had the family feuds and all of this. So as long as we consider ourselves to be different races, then there's always room to debate. But if we are one race but with different ethnic things and identities, then we can unify. Once we unify, the church must unify. Christ is coming back for a church without spot or wrinkle. And there's not going to be separate races in that identification, nor in heaven there will not be separate races. I tell people, if you're an Andorian or a Klingon from Star Trek, then you would be a separate race. If you're a human being, you're one race. We can all become a new creation, a new race, a royal priesthood, through our Christian faith. So that is what is holding us up from breaking through what's called the race wars. And I believe we can do that. I believe that the church must take the lead on that understanding. And it used to be Caucasian people would say, well, your people need this, and your people are being destroyed. I say, well, we your people too. Aren't we human? So we have to get that revelation and work together as a body. And then perhaps the Mormons or the Muslims. I'm going to finish with this response, but I was riding with a Muslim in the car the other day, and he was talking, and we were just talking, and he says, well, yeah, you don't sound like a lot of Christians. I said, God honestly loves everyone, but there's a way for God to be our Father through my Lord Jesus Christ. Oh, we like Jesus. He's a great prophet. I said, you happen to be right about that. I said, as a matter of fact, he is the king of prophets. And he said that, the young man got quiet. He didn't know what to say. So I believe if we can get ourselves unified over the race question and realize there's one human race, then the rest of the world will begin to follow.
Now, folks, I know this is a sensitive topic. I'm sure that you have questions or comments. You can feel free to press *6 in order to ask Alveda King any question that you might have. But since no one is stepping up, let me ask another question. How do you feel about the way this has been handled so far? I mean, do you think that, relatively speaking, it's been dealt with well? Do you think that the involvement of people like Al Sharpton, let's say of Al Sharpton, period, since he seems to have really kind of taken the lead, do you think that that's been destructive? What's your take on it? I was there at the funeral. I heard his speech live.
Yeah, he took over the funeral. From what I could see, he took over the funeral, and I just thought that was very disrespectful. I wasn't there, but from what I could observe, was my observation correct? Didn't he kind of just take over?
He did. That would be my observation as well.
I thought that was offensive. I thought that was terrible. I did say on, was it Hannity show? One of the shows I did say, I do not understand, I don't know Reverend Sharpton's goal, but often when he goes into a city, things escalate instead of calm down. I did say that. And that is the nature of how he usually proceeds, honestly. And I don't think that is helpful. But I do believe that there was a voice of sanity and reason that rose up very early that to a certain extent even embarrassed or neutralized Reverend Jackson and Reverend Sharpton. And I feel, I don't want to take any credit for this because it was the Lord, but for those of us who said don't rush to judgment, wait for justice. And there were many voices that kept saying that, and as that voice became louder, it began to calm down. And as a matter of fact, I noticed one of the nights I was on the phone, we were praying with a prayer group, and there were several prayer groups, including yours, Bishop. And as prayer continued to escalate and grow stronger, then the peace came down. And many of us pointed out on the air that it was the people from outside that were being outside agitators that were doing the rioting. And I remember we were saying if you do a curfew, the people who live in Ferguson are going to be home by 9 or 10 o'clock. So the only people you're going to have out in the streets because they don't have anywhere else to go would be the rioters and the looters. And so as those things were done, I did not necessarily agree with the martial law kind of thing, the militaristic. I have, in the 60s, when I was marching with my father and my uncle in those days, I was tear gassed. I was shot in the arm with nerve gas. I was thrown in a paddy wagon, and I was a nonviolent protester. I did try to defend my girlfriend. One of the officers had stomped into her stomach and her pelvis with a boot. And then I did try to get him off of her. And in the process, I was shot in the arm with nerve gas for them to try to restrain me. Because I was saying, you can't stomp a girl on the ground. You can't do that. And I got kind of punched and thrown in the paddy wagon. But, see, I know those kinds of things happen when emotions are heated and things escalate. So we're going to have peace, not the militaristic, in your face, the dogs were there barking, and oh, goodness. It was such a time. So we were doing everything. That's why you're there now. while I will be there, while my cousin Bernice is there, we are successfully bringing the voice of peace and reason into the equation.
Okay, well, look, let's give some others an opportunity to ask you questions or comment. Martin, let's go to the calls.
Yes, we have a caller coming in. Last number is 8416. Caller, you can ask your question.
Good morning. Good afternoon now. This is Pastor Melvin Johnson from Texas. And I certainly do agree with what Dr. Alveda King is saying. But one thing about it is it seems like we keep running over the same territory and ground. Nothing really is done until, another tragic occurs. But I would love to get Dr. Alveda King's contact information. I would like to also send her a copy of my book, Overcoming Racism Through the Gospel. And prayerfully we can combine notes and work together from this perspective.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead. Alveda.
My contact information quickly: Alveda, ALVEDA @priest PRIESTSLORLIFE.com. Alveda @priest4life.com. It's better if you would email me first, and you can also text me, because if you call, my voicemail is probably going to be full, and I likely won't pick it up, but I do text 678-886-7804. 678-886-7804. Website, AfricanAmericanOutreach.com.
Okay. Alveda, listen, we're in a very, very difficult situation. I just shared this incident that happened in Mississippi. And, many people say to me that even if they didn't agree with President Obama ideologically or some of his policies, and I share the sentiment that they hoped that his presidency would bring some healing and sort of put some of the racial division behind us and bring us into a new era in our country. That has not happened, apparently. Do you think he should have or could do something to help? Do you think it's helped for him to weigh in on incidents like this? And what would you say if you were in his place? How would you handle these things? In fact, I was wondering as you were talking, why don't they call on someone like you rather than on Reverend Al Sharpton to speak to these issues? You march with Dr. King. You understand these issues. You have a very biblical view on them. Why not have someone like you called in these situations rather than Al Sharpton? But that's sort of a two-part question, and then we'll go back to the phones.
It's amazing how things are orchestrated. Reverend Sharpton at one point admitted he's been an FBI operative. Now I think he's saying that he's representing the White House in Ferguson. So if he's doing that, how can he be an objective commentator on MSNBC? See, these are all questions that people are totally ignoring. And I believe that it is appropriate for us in social media on calls like this, when I do get the opportunity, more on Fox than anywhere else, to speak these types of truths. I do take those opportunities. I'll be honest, though, I was uninvited off of a couple of Fox shows. I won't say which ones they were, because I would not attack Reverend Sharpton or Reverend Jackson. And all I would say was, well, we don't know their motives, and they do escalate incidents rather than calm them down. But this is a time of grieving. So rather than to debate about them, we really need to be praying for the community and the family and do what you've done. And our Reverend Jackson, my cousins have been there. I'm on the way, because there's a scripture: be not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So when we carry in good, when we carry in peace, when we carry in the presence of the Lord that lives with us and abides with us, then things do calm down or really transform. And then we can go into transcendence, rehabilitation, rebuilding the wall, then revival, you see. But it also takes a lot of repentance. And the one thing that does disturb me with my Caucasian brothers and sisters, many get it. But some will still say, oh, racism's not really a problem. We love everybody. We're in the church. But I've honestly had some of my Caucasian friends on one-on-one and private conversations admit I wouldn't want my child to marry somebody that's not my same. And then they use the word race. I say, well, we're all a human race. So, some of that really still does exist, unfortunately. And but I do believe our good friend, Reverend Clenard Childers, I was so upset with God when President Obama was Senator Obama and he was running. And God let me know he was going to win. And I'm like, God, what are you doing? Don't you know this man is pro-abortion? Don't you know he's pro-gay? Here I am asking God, don't you know? I mean, what naivety, that being very naive. God knows everything. So Clenard said, Alveda, God can take one man, one vessel, and expose racism, reproductive genocide, and sexual perversion, and uncover all of it. And then I had another friend, he kept dreaming, his wife kept dreaming. I saw Senator Obama then, who would be president, in a lab coat, medical lab coat, and a stethoscope. And she couldn't interpret it at the time, but it turned out that he was going to take health care and pervert it with this birth control thing. So God was trying to show us. So it's not like God went to sleep or stepped off the throne or anything and President Obama slipped in there. That was judgment to give us the worst so we could cry out to him for the best. And so really what you see now, the church is not as sleepy as we were. We are ready, some of us who are bold enough, are having these race conversations again with more integrity, calling for humility among ourselves. And then the African Americans, I said, I wish you all had met my daddy who told me I can't hate white people because white people did not kill my uncle, the devil did. I wish he could have told you that before he went to heaven. So we can't, on either side, we cannot do this. We must come together. And as we do that, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, then we are, to answer your first question, can we achieve victory over these matters? Absolutely we can. And I say we are doing so.
Well, before you go, we got two more quick questions. I'd ask callers, keep your questions to the point because Alveda only had 30 minutes with us. So let's go to the next caller.
Yeah, caller number 7121. Caller, you can ask your question, phone number ending in 7121.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. Brother Jackson, this is Jim Wright. I wanted to ask her about abortion because that's close to my heart. One of the things that amazes me as I look at what's happening in our nation with 56 million recorded abortions since Roe versus Wade, when I listen to some of the organizations like NAACP, they don't have any acknowledgement of what's happening in the black community. It grieves my heart that many of the black children are being aborted. In terms of percentages, of course, it's white people and everybody else doing it, but in the black community, it's being targeted with Planned Parenthood. And I just grieve the fact that I never hear anybody in the black community talk about this, especially some of the groups that lead the black causes. So I want to get your input on that because the Lord loves all the babies, black, yellow, red, etc., and I do too.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim. Go
ahead, thankfully, with the help of, like I say, Reverend Jackson, I'm so honored that we work together, and that's why I keep making mention of this. But there's a whole group of African-American leaders. We have our Black Pro-Life Coalition.org, where our book, Life at All Costs, is available. Wonderful graphics by Ryan Baumberger. A strong and continually growing group of African-American voices who defend life, marriage, family, economic equity, and et cetera. So please visit us. And what we did, we took a project called My Alpha 21 several years ago now, Life Dynamics, Mark Crutcher, and we began to get it into the African-American communities and reveal these truths. as truth emerged, good was overcoming evil because we were informing, educating, and activating a community. When people don't know truth, they will live in a lie. So we've had to eradicate the lies with truth. So rather, we don't fight lies, we promote truth, because that approach just happens to be stronger for us. And so blacks now are getting that. And then they're, again, in the Caucasian community, they're getting, your people have more abortions, and why are they having these babies anyway and not being married? And so I said, well, we have to teach. This happens in every community, but certainly in our community, there was not enough education. I had a celebration for my book, King Rules, at our home church in Atlanta, and a lady brought her abstinence curriculum and gave it away to the people for free. An African-American woman did this. And when the people began to look at it, they were like, wow, why isn't anybody telling us this? Why instead Planned Parenthood was getting money. Bishop Jackson, I will stay on long enough to answer that second question. But Planned Parenthood was getting clinics in high schools, having the parents waive their rights, parental rights to ask questions and know, and slipping Depo-Provera patches and shots into these young girls. Now, several years later, the girls have breast cancer, cervical cancer, etc. And we're fighting that for all we can and getting this information out. So it's the problem with the abortion, the carcinogenic contraceptives. They were brought into our community as free gifts from the government and Planned Parenthood. They wanted to help our people. And it looked, people who need something, and somebody says, I'm going to give you something free, we don't always ask enough questions to find out what's the motive of the gift. But now we are asking people to examine these motives, and we are having tremendous success.
Amen. Amen. Okay, well, let's take one more question. Thanks for staying to take one more question. Let's go to that last question.
Great. Last question, caller number 1826. 1826.
Hi, yes, this is Christy Berry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Christy, how are you?
I'm good. Dr. King, thank you for being with us today. I'm really honored I was selected to be able to submit a question. My question is, I am part of the Caucasian community, but what I want to know is how can we become more involved to de-escalate these violent situations, and how can we become more involved in bringing peace to the process?
What you can do first is we can all increase our prayer efforts and have more of these types of calls. Make this information available on our varied social networks. If I send out an alert, retweet it or like it, or Bishop Jackson does, or any of us, and then you do the same. Instagram, you don't want to flood Instagram with too much of this kind of thing because people like to use it, for chatty, nice, fun things, but occasionally you can get that message in a pointed manner, even on an Instagram. LinkedIn, the same thing, because that's not the purpose of LinkedIn, but every once in a while. But Facebook and Twitter, get it out continuously. And then your local radios and your local television shows where you actually have friends, get them to do little specials and projects, but it first starts with prayer. Then it lets officials who will have the integrity and strength to stand up for truth and to do truth from their post, you see. And when we do these kinds of things, we will actually continue to grow because we are winning. And Bishop Jackson can give you some proof and evidence of those types of things. But we are winning, but we have to up our game. Now, Bishop Jackson, I will not be able to talk anymore. I must go on mute because I'm going to have some things happening in the background that would interfere with too much noise.
Well, listen,
but I want
to
hear. I do want to hear, so I'm going to remain on the call, but I'm now going to go over to mute. But it's been an honor to talk and to share. Please visit those websites that I mentioned.
Thank you so much, Alveda, and we'll make sure that we get those references out in our next letter to all of our supporters so that they know how to access that information. I went to the website as you were talking about it, looked at it, and you were explaining it, and it's very, very helpful information. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'll be here until you hang up, but I'm just going to be on mute. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Alveda. Folks, that was Alveda King, and, of course, I think everybody on this call knows her. Now, since I'm in Ferguson now, let me share with you my observations. I was in attendance at the funeral yesterday. I was a little bit late arriving, but I caught most of it and was there for most of it. And Alveda has it right. Some of what was said was quite helpful, quite edifying. I mean, some of it was just family members just sharing their own thoughts and insights and memories of Michael. They called him Mike or Big Mike. And that's exactly what you would expect at a funeral. And there were some who struck a tone of conciliation, reconciliation, and peace. Reverend Charles Ewing, who is apparently Michael Brown's great uncle, said a number of things, but he ended with 2 Chronicles 7:14, which I thought was really the highlight in terms of wisdom. If my people, which are called by my name, he was calling on all of us to humble ourselves before God and pray and seek God's face and turn from our wicked ways. Look, see, the bottom line is that, as one preacher said, I won't take credit for this, it encapsulates something I've been saying for years. It's not the skin, it's the sin. See, ultimately, I've said this, and people have taken it the wrong way, as they sometimes do when ministers say things that are really prophetic in nature. I've said we don't have a racial problem in America. We've never had. We have a sin problem. Now, of course, I don't mean that sin problem doesn't manifest itself racially. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that the deeper issue is the spiritual condition of human beings, that we look for ways to divide. And I've often used the analogy. I said if God somehow made everybody on earth all the same complexion and gave us all the same textured hair, and he left one difference between us all, which is eye color, it wouldn't be long before those with blue eyes would be looking at those with gray eyes, would be looking at those with brown eyes with suspicion, saying, yeah, you notice the way those people with those hazel eyes look at you? Something's not right about those people, because it's what human beings do. You know, most of the genocides, most of the mass murders, the horrible pogroms have happened in homogeneous communities. In other words, Europeans killing other Europeans, Africans killing other Africans, Asians killing other Asians. It hasn't been racial. And so when people come to, but they found other reasons, of course, to divide themselves, whether it was tribe or it was ideology or it was religion or whatever it might be. And so when you have a situation like the United States of America, where you have people who come from all over the world, united not by race but by an idea, then, of course, race then becomes a convenient manifestation of this tendency in human beings toward division. And so ultimately it is a spiritual problem. And to see it only as a matter of skin color really misses the deeper issue, which brings me to Reverend Al Sharpton, which is why he has no answers, which is why, as Reverend Melvin Brown said, why do we keep repeating the same problem over and over again? Because superficial, fleshly answers can't be the solution to deep spiritual problems. See, our founding fathers really had the answer. They didn't know it, perhaps, but they really had the answer. All men are created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The idea was that human beings' rights, dignity, don't come from other human beings. They come from God, and they are given to us as a gift and are inherent in us as human beings. The government doesn't dispense them. The government's not supposed to be able to take them away. That's really what we've got to come back to. Every time we say the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I mean, the beauty of those words, it staggers me every time I hear them. What other nation recites and confesses such things over itself? One nation under God, not black, not white, not brown, not yellow, not red, but one nation under God. That's who we are. Now, I went to the funeral, and I had to sit through Reverend Al Sharpton's sermon. I have to be honest, folks. It was not easy. It really wasn't. And I don't hate Al Sharpton. Whenever you disagree with people, the idea is, and the liberal media tends to paint you, well, you're a hater. I don't hate Al Sharpton. I don't hate anybody. I love people. I love Al Sharpton. Pray for him. But I just don't agree with him. I think he's wrong. I think when he stands up and gives a long oration in which he accuses the police of having displayed the body on the ground as if this was some racist plot to denigrate and disrespect Michael Brown, when he basically has already made the judgment about the guilt of this officer, and he talks about the killings of black men by police officers as if that is an epidemic in our country, and the reality is that black-on-black crime is the epidemic in our country. You're missing the mark. You're missing the mark. I think a funeral is a time for comforting that family. It's a time for encouraging people to pray, to come together, not an opportunity to engage in what, frankly, I consider to be demagoguery. Much of it was just demagoguery. He took a scripture, but he didn't completely went off that and just talked. And frankly, as Alveda said, he just took over the funeral. And I have a major problem with that because, as Reverend Melvin Johnson said, implied in his question earlier, so when this conflagration, when this crisis is over, you know what we do? We then wait for the next one, and we repeat the same pattern all over again because there are really no answers other than let's go out and protest and let's go out and march. But we've got to get to the deeper issues at stake. And to me, the deeper issue is a spiritual one, and it manifests through cultural issues. I mean, to have that platform and to say nothing about the need for black fathers in the home. Hey, what's wrong with that? Why? I tweeted out that, we do not have an epidemic of police killing black men. Now, we do have those things that happen. By the way, they also kill white men. Let's be honest. They do kill white men, except when they kill white men, it's almost, well, that's no problem with that. It's okay to kill white men because we know that's not racist. But when a black man dies, police arrest 3.4 million black men every year. They arrest about 12.2 million people. 3.4 million of them are black. About less than 100. I think last year was 96. Less than 100 black men are killed. Now, those 96 are tragic and they're horrible. And believe me, I am in no way suggesting, well, that's no problem. It is a problem. Of course it's a problem. But let's be proportional here. Let's at least consider the fact that 7,000 black men die every year in black-on-black crime. And I don't say that to condemn the black community or to exonerate police officers who kill black folks. I say that with a view towards saving black life, folks. How about saving the lives of people? I mean, that, it seems to me, isn't that ultimately what the motive is? That we would want Michael Brown to be alive, not dead? And we would want the thousands of black men who die every year at the hands of other black men to be alive, not dead? To be gainfully employed, to be going to college, to be taking care of their families or their children, to be productive citizens. I mean, it seems to me that's the point. And liberals immediately jumped on me and said, oh, yeah, 96 black men did, no problem. But no wonder we can't have any kind of reasonable discussion. Because the moment you try to bring some kind of balanced or even different approach than what the liberal or mainstream media or liberals in general want you to bring, they automatically begin with ridicule and denigration and so forth. So you can't really have a discussion because you don't want to talk to people who do that. But that's what we've ultimately got to have. We've ultimately got to have a discussion about these issues that seeks to bring us together rather than rip us apart. Now, I've been criticized when I was running, and I said that, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother were an intact family in Orange County, Virginia, Gabriel and Eliza Jackson. They raised my grandfather and raised all of his siblings. And I said that it took the government, beginning in the 1960s, to destroy the black family that has survived through slavery. And you know how they wrote that? They wrote that as if E.W. Jackson thinks slavery was better for the black community. I mean, folks, you can't make this stuff up. Of course, it almost defies comprehension to think that people could say that with a straight face. Because, of course, I don't believe that. I think people were intended to be free. That's what our founding fathers said. We were supposed to be free. I'm simply pointing out that even the horrors of slavery did not destroy the black family. But the policies of the 1960s did. A friend of mine was telling me about a film that depicts the building of a housing project for the black community, and one of the rules of living in the housing project was that there could not be a man in the home. And it depicts in a microcosm the very thing that we've talked about in macrocosm, which is these policies that tended to incentivize black men not being in the home started a process that has now ended in 72% of black children being born out of wedlock and having no father in the home. And that's a tragedy. And the government messed it up, frankly. But it's going to take black folks and people of goodwill coming together and acknowledging the problem to fix it up. Now, one of the things I've said is that, I don't use the term African American. I prefer the term Americans of African descent. And it's not because I am not proud of who I am. I am very much proud of who I am because God made me who I am. My ancestors came from Africa. They apparently were from Ghana and the Ivory Coast. I've done some genetic research on myself. This is who I am. My ancestors were slaves and then sharecroppers. I'm proud of my background. I believe that God gives every person a unique background, a unique set of experiences. But I say it that way because I want us to come together to be Americans first. Americans first. And then, yes, Americans of African descent, Americans of Irish descent, Americans of Italian descent, Americans of Jewish descent or Russian descent or Puerto Rican descent or Mexican descent or whatever it is, but Americans first. One family, one people. If we don't do that, folks, we're going to lose this country. When I say lose this country, I mean we're going to lose the sense of a common destiny that makes us a nation. And if we ever lose that, we will no longer be the great nation that we've been. Now, Alveda said that we're winning, and I believe that. By faith, I believe that. But we got a whole lot of work to do. Because sometimes, it takes 2 steps backwards before you can take 1 step forward. And sometimes you have to be set back to be set up. We've suffered some setbacks. But I believe just like Dr. King in jail in Birmingham wrote the famous letter from a Birmingham jail, which has become one of the most read and renowned pieces of literature in human history, but it was written from a jail. And just like George Washington in Valley Forge praying because his army was decimated and victory seemed as far as it away as it ever could, and maybe there would be no victory, but nevertheless held on. And, of course, became one of the greatest figures in human history. I believe that we are going through a terrible time in the history of this country, preparing us for a brighter future than anything we've ever known. I believe that every fiber of my being. I'm not just saying it because I think it sounds good. I believe it. And I believe that we are going to achieve the kind of community that Dr. King dreamed of, a beloved community in which we care about one another. Because we're human beings. Because we're human beings. And because we know the same God made us all. I don't know what the ultimate outcome of the grand jury will be or a jury will be. I do know this. I know that we've lost a young man who undoubtedly had potential in life, and he's gone now, and there's nothing we can do to bring him back. I do know that a police officer, I don't know with what motive. I wasn't there. I don't know the facts of why he did it, but I know his life now hangs in the balance, and I know that they're both American citizens, and we may well lose them both. And it's a tragedy that we as Americans want to avoid in the future, whether it means more training for police officers or it means more mentoring and involvement with these young people, or it means both. Because what we don't want is to lose our people to senseless, horrible, divisive tragedies that leave our country worse off. So, folks, I'm here in Ferguson for the next few days to work with ministers. And by the way, this is the encouraging part of this whole thing. I know I said it was difficult for me to sit through and listen to Al Sharpton because, in my view, he does engage in demagoguery. I'm praying for him, though, praying for him that Al Sharpton will get saved. But while all of that has been happening, there have been ministers on the ground here who have been doing yeoman service. They've been out on these streets. They've been praying. They've been talking not only to the black protesters, but they've been talking to the police officers, because there's got to be a future for Ferguson when this situation dies down. It's going to take everybody working together in order for that to happen. Those are the people that I will be talking to while I'm here. I'm going to a meeting of ministers on Wednesday. Quite a few ministers will be there. Meeting with a high-level public official. This will not be the only issue on the agenda, but I know it will be one. So I am encouraged by what I see on the ground. And so in spite of the fact that the media tends to pay attention to the Al Sharpton sweeping into the community and not so much attention to the many ministers who are doing what the Bible calls us to do. It says we have a ministry, not of division, but a ministry of reconciliation. They are doing that work. I am so grateful to just have an opportunity, an honor to have an opportunity to meet these people and to talk to them and to hear their heart. Because one of the things I want to walk away from here with is when I leave Ferguson later this week, I want to walk away with this understanding. What do we do to avoid these scenarios in the future? What do we do to respond in a way that is unifying, that builds community, that addresses the problem, yes, punishes wrongdoing where we find it, yes, but that leaves us united rather than divided, leaves our community better off rather than worse off, and avoids the looting and the destruction of businesses such as has happened here in Ferguson, that could affect this community for a generation, folks. Because 30 businesses, my understanding, about 30 businesses have been destroyed. That's not good for the community. It's not good for employment. It's not good for the future of Ferguson. It's not good for the future of any city where something like this happens. So I'm hoping to come away with some solutions, if you will, or some principles for avoiding what has happened in Ferguson. And I'll be learning that, frankly, not from the Al Sharptons or Jesse Jacksons of the world, with all due respect to them, but I'll be learning that from the ministers here on the ground in Ferguson who were doing work before this happened and are doing even more work now that it has happened, and will be here when all the cameras are gone and all the lights are gone and all the celebrities are gone and all the limousines are gone, because there were limousines lined up at the funeral. And frankly, they'll be here when I'm gone. God bless them, praying for their continued success in what they're doing, praying for our country, that we will have leadership that really focuses on the principles that made this the greatest nation on earth, rather than focusing on their own selfish agenda. God, let it be so. Thank you all so much. We will be back with you next Tuesday, and I believe that we've already got our guest, Martin, for next Tuesday. Martin, are you there? Martin, I believe we've already got our guest for next Tuesday.
Yes, we do. We do. It's going to be Eric Stanley from the Alliance for Defending Freedom, and we're going to be talking about the IRS versus the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Yep.
Excellent. And folks, don't forget that the IRS, I mean, if you haven't heard this, the IRS, the Justice Department, has now admitted that those emails that were lost, well, they're not lost. It just seems that they're difficult to get to now. So I'm sure we'll be hearing from Eric Stanley exactly where we are, and who knows, by next week we could know something more than we know today. But look, God bless you all. Stay in the fight. Remember, we will not be defeated. We cannot be defeated if we will not quit. God bless you. Be with you again next Tuesday at noon.